Andrew, hello. Thank you very much for your question. You described everything in great detail. I think that in the near future I will answer your question more extensively for my video. But I understand that you are already expecting some kind of answer, some feedback today. Therefore, I decided to at least briefly go over your situation so that you could get some kind of response today. So, the age-old classic questions: what to do? Who is to blame? Regarding your situation, why did this happen? The most important thing, and I think you won't deny it because it often comes up in your words, and this time I ruined everything, and so on. When a man takes the wrong actions, when he builds relationships incorrectly, when he behaves incorrectly in relationships, when he positions himself incorrectly next to a woman, naturally, this leads to unfavorable outcomes. The first thing to correct in yourself is to learn how to build relationships correctly. You need to learn how to communicate properly with women. You need to learn how to position yourself correctly so that this does not happen again in the future, not only with this particular girl, but in general. Of course, something needs to change within yourself. Because if there have been several attempts, and each time they ended differently than you wanted, it means you were taking the wrong actions. If you wanted one result but got another, then you did something wrong. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think you probably want to hear something else. You want to hear that this girl is truly meant for you, that you are meant for each other, and everything will work out. But I prefer to speak the truth. Yes, maybe this will be a harsh truth, but at the very least, as I see it, there is a saying, no matter how much you straighten a crooked wheel, it will never roll straight. If a guy and a girl try to build a relationship and it doesn't work, then they get back together and it still doesn't work, they try again and again it doesn't work. Of course, there are moments when you feel great together, when everything seems wonderful and harmonious. But if the relationship is filled with negative emotions, then quite simply, this guy and this girl are not meant for each other. They should not be in a relationship. Unfortunately, soap operas, TV series, parents, and society impose the idea that such relationships should be fought for. But that's not true. If communication with this girl over a long period brings you only pain, you simply should not be together. There is another girl who is in no way worse than the one you are writing about, both externally and internally, but she suits you better. Not only in fairy tales does a prince find his princess, and they live happily ever after. In real life, it is very rare that the first, second, third, or fourth girl you meet is the right one for you to build a happy family with, have children, and truly live happily ever after. Relationships should be built with the right person. And this is also a skill that a man develops with experience in communicating with the opposite sex. When you can see, with this girl I can build a relationship, but with this one I can't. If over such a long period things haven't worked out, then you need to build a relationship with another girl. And here is one of the most important points. All this time, you simply haven't been communicating with other girls who are at her level. You didn't mention her name. The girl you have a relationship with. Well, let's assume that you didn't communicate with girls who are at her level. But you should have. If you had interacted with girls who were just as good, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, at some point you would have found someone with whom you felt much better. Because she would not be inferior in intelligence, humor, or any other aspect, but the two of you would simply be a better match. Imagine that inside us there is a kind of vessel, and when this vessel is emptied, say due to a breakup, it needs to be refilled by another person. If it is not filled by another girl, you will try to return to what was before. So, you need to communicate with other women. That way, not only will you gain new experiences and relationships, but if you have a mentor guiding you correctly, you will change, learn how to build relationships, and simply behave correctly with women. And you will forget about this one. Your situation is unusual, but such cases are very common. When a guy and a girl try to build a relationship, the guy believes she is the center of his universe, that they are meant for each other. But for some reason, things don't work out. He doesn't really want to change anything in a relationship. He thinks everything will work itself out. And she doesn't want to change either. But despite this, they continue, or at least he continues, to believe for a long time that things will work out. And one more little nuance I want to mention today. It is very important. When relationships don't work out, whether due to the man's fault or both partners' fault, and especially if it's due to the woman's fault, but the man wants to renew the relationship more than she does, then he becomes less attractive. If a man wants to return to an old relationship more than the woman does, and she doesn't want it, then he starts to lose her attraction. This is a life rule that, unfortunately, many men find difficult to understand. Because many believe, if I say I love you more, if I say I want to get back together more, if I behave in a certain way, then she will come back. But in reality, the opposite happens. He only pushes her further away. So if in recent times you have repeatedly said, let's talk, been the initiator of getting back together, the initiator of communication, then unfortunately, what actually happened is that you only distance yourself from her. You needed to handle things differently. What to do? We return to this question again. You need to change. You need to change your way of communicating with women. You need to develop this skill like any other so that you can control any situation involving women. It's like learning a language. If you speak English poorly, you start improving it. If your pronunciation is bad, you work on it to make it better. The same applies here. If you struggle with communicating with women, you need to develop yourself in this area. That's about it. So, if you're ready for some changes, write to me, and we'll discuss what can be done. If you have any questions, also write, I'll be happy to answer.